Hello, and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Happy New Year. It
Happy New
is
Year.
2022. I mean, technically, we're recording this in 2021, but you're watching this in 2022, assuming, of course, mankind has survived and didn't die in a post-apocalyptic nuclear holocaust, December 31st, 2021. Randall, do you think that you think that's still the future? Do you think we made it to 2022?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully, this is the year that they have jetpacks and androids that don't kill people. That are my big two hopes. What are your
Do you
two
know?
hopes?
Do you know that that's a story going right now? There's like this story in the news that kill bots are going to become a thing. The UN is about to rule on them. I think they might have already ruled on kill bots. Have you heard this story yet, Chris?
No, but I kind of know how this is going to end, where the killbots take over the UN. So I mean that's just kind of anybody who's ever read any science fiction knows that's just the destiny. All right. So anyway, all kidding aside, though more kidding to come. It's our review. It's a year in review, 2021, a year in review in arts and entertainment. We're going to take a look at some of the stories and trends that define the year in arts and entertainment. But beforehand, hey, Randall, even in the year 2022, what's a good way to reach out to us?
Well, just go to our website, kristenrandall.com. There's various ways there. Our Facebook page is pretty popular, Arts and Entertainment with Chris and Randall. Yeah, just check it out. Check us out on Facebook.
All right, so yeah, human beings from the year 2022. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say and what you think we're doing well or what you think we're doing terribly. Well, we're old men from the past, so good luck on that. But at least some ideas for what you would like us to be doing in 2022 subject topics. But today, we're going to take a look at some of the big stories or events that happened in arts and entertainment in 2022. Now, I just want to say one thing because Randall, I consider you a fairly literate gentleman, a man of arts and letters, and I like to pretend I am too. But I just want to warn everyone, this is not going to be like Entertainment Weekly's or the New York Times Arts and Leisure comprehensive review of the year. That's just not going to happen. We're not going to touch poetry, or we're not going to touch ballet. We're not going to touch literature. I mean, I don't even think for a second that we're going to get too highbrow or even too lowbrow. I mean, hell, there was a lot of things we could have talked about, but we're just going to talk about, about 5 or 7 things that are kind of germane to the year. And I guess before we start, what do you think are like I would say the two biggest defining aspects of life, not arts and entertainment, though it does ricochet off into arts and entertainment, of 2022 was the end of the Trump administration and the second year of COVID, especially the beginning of vaccines. Do you think those are two big issues that were pretty big this year?
Yeah, I mean, they'll probably be forgotten in years to come because I think COVID is going to become endemic and it'll be like the flu and we'll have to get a COVID vaccine every year. It's going to be crazy, Chris.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
agree.
we had to go into lockdown. I mean, for people like 100 years from now, they're going to look back and say, what? They had to go into lockdown? We get COVID every year. What?
So yeah, I would say one of the key defining aspects of 2021 was how different or similar it was to the preceding year 2020, which was in many ways maybe a far more dramatic year, and therefore, let's see how it plays out. So let's go to something that I think really was, I think one of the areas of art that was truly very much affected in 2020, and 2021 really saw a resurgence is the return of the movie theater and watching movies in movie theaters. Randall, did you see any movies in movie theaters this year?
No, I was trying to not get COVID, but so I didn't go to the.
All right, well that actually is very it's okay because I mean one of the big things that we are talking about is whereas Randall hasn't gone. I got an AMC movie pass.
Well,
Now
what'd you see?
I'm not sponsored by AMC, but can I just tell you about this pass for a
Okay.
moment? So for the price of like an IMAX movie theater ticket, I can see like 3 movies a week, and I can get my seats in advance, and I can see like which theaters have the least amount of crowds. I can order my food in advance, so I can pick it up. So if you really are antisocial, and right now I'm 100% antisocial. When I go to the movies now, I sit all the way in the extreme left-hand side or all the way in the extreme upper right-hand side. I always look to see before I get my tickets what theater has like the least amount of people. And then if I want to buy popcorn or soda, I do it remote and then I just pick it up. So, I mean, these are things that probably would have been in place even prior to COVID. But, and of course, I have to show my vaccine registration when I go to the theater, and I also have to wear a mask unless I'm eating popcorn or soda or beer or what have you. I get to drink beer now in the movie theaters. Can I tell you, I love drinking beer in the movie theaters. Nicole Kidman says heartbreak feels better in a movie theater. I don't know about that, but overpriced beer is definitely good in a movie
Yeah,
theater.
there's this weird commercial, okay? So you just mentioned it with Nicole Kidman where she's trying to get people to go back to the movie theaters. So you see Nicole Kidman in an empty movie theater and she talks
Yes.
about how great movies are. And it's so weird to me, Chris, because Nicole Kidman is someone who has probably cannot go to a normal movie theater with normal people, right? Because she would be
Apparently
mobbed
not.
by crowds.
Yeah.
So like she's probably been in empty movie theaters where they're emptied for her industry, for some industry event, but she's never quote unquote gone to the movies like for like
Yeah,
30
it's not a
years.
very encouraging clip because first off, she's the only person in the movie theater. Number one, and
Well,
then
it has to be that way. You can't put her in a normal movie theater with normal people. You know what they should have done is they should have got like some schlub, right? Some normal
yeah,
person, be like, "Hey, bro," you like holding a beer, like you, Chris.
yeah,
"Hey,
yeah,
bro,
no, it's
come
true
back to
because
the movies. Check it out, bro."
see normal people. Instead, she's dressed in a pinstripe suit, which also not a great look on her, or for what you're trying to do. I get it; it's like celluloid. And then she sits down, and there's a soda right next to her, but she didn't come in with the soda. So it's as if the people who are doing the cleanup at the movie theater just couldn't be bothered to even pick up the trash. And then poor Nicole Kidman has decided that because she has an eating disorder and she can't have soda, she'll just sit next to it but never touch it. Anyway, if you do go to the movies, that's the treat you're in for. So last year was the beginning of a trend of because the theaters were closed last year, movies like Wonder Woman 1984 and the live action Mulan premiered not in the movie theaters, but they premiered on cable and streaming services. And this year was an interesting thing because this year movies did premiere in the theaters, but very, very quickly moved on to cable and streaming. There was the Black Widow. Now, I think if memory serves me right, didn't Black Widow come out on a Friday in the movie theaters, and then like on Saturday it was on Disney Plus?
Yeah, so the streaming services, especially HBO, who's HBO affiliated with? Warner Brothers. They're experimenting with
Warner Brothers is HBO, and
they're
then
ex-
Disney Plus is Marvel.
they're experimenting with simultaneous release on home and theaters. I mean, for sequels, for sequel movies like the Marvel movies that are like a series. They did this with Dune. Dune was a big hit. It was a big hit in the theaters, and I think streaming and probably got a lot of eyeballs. For movies like that, this makes a lot of financial sense because you're trying to get people to watch all of them, to watch the sequels. So if somebody doesn't see the first one, then or the second one, they're not going to go see the third and fourth and fifth one. So I sat at home on my butt and watched Dune on HBO, and it was free. And I think it was only available for a couple weeks. I mean, it's so weird. I don't know what their strategy is, but They definitely want as many eyeballs on these as possible because Dune 2 is going to come out, and you know they want people to have seen the first one.
And that
Uh,
happened even on small budget films too. I would see that movies would be on Hulu that were just in the theaters. You know, not just the premium streaming services, but things that were playing just down the street at an art house cinema were already on Netflix and Amazon. Amazon, like Disney, like Warner, owns both a streaming service
well,
and
I
a
think this is
film.
great, Chris. I mean, back in the olden days, okay, like when I was going to film school, you could say, uh, these art films would come out in theaters, and they would not get distribution anywhere else, Chris. And so if you didn't go to like the three screens in the world that were showing this movie, you would never see this movie ever. It would be gone forever, Chris. And now with streaming, it's not the case. I mean, I think it's great.
You know, actually, you raise a good point. So the downside of blockbuster films going directly was Scarlett Johansson was the star of Black Widow. She sued Disney because the way her contract was set up had to do with how much the opening grosses, the opening take would be that week, and how much movie money that would make domestically, and it didn't factor in the offset of having it go on to HBO. But they settled out of court amicably because Scarlett Johansson's still working for Disney. And then people like Emily Blunt, Dwayne Johnson, and other actors, Emma Wood, who had the same experience happen, they also ended up getting compensated for it. So now it really actually changed the way A-list actors and actors in general are compensated, where they now have to factor in such a thing. Now, I heard that Warner Brothers will not be doing this in 2022, that they will just wait a while. And I have seen some theaters are now getting the movie distribution companies to wait anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks before releasing the movie on a streaming service. But even with 2 to 4 weeks as a waiting period, compared to the way things were prior to COVID, that's amazing, isn't that, Randall?
Yeah, it used to be like a year or something, 2 years.
6 months,
I think
you know,
France
four to
France has a literal law where like I don't know what it is. It's something like 9 months or something. Like a movie has to be in theaters. It can only be you have to wait something like 9 months before it can be on TV after theaters or in some other format. I mean, it's like a literal law in France.
Yeah. So,
I
I
mean,
mean, I agree with you in general. I think the real beneficiaries from this are the small art house films, the independent films. That you're right. If you don't live in a big city with an art house theater, or if your AMC is only showing that art house film for maybe a week or two to qualify for the Oscars, and you missed it, yeah, it is really nice to know. Like, I missed One Night in Soho. I think I'm going to miss Belfast. So at least I know that One Night in Soho or Belfast is a film I'll probably be able to watch on one of the many different channels I subscribe to.
well, I think in a certain sense, the internet is the nightmare of the big distributors because one of the things that made the big distributors, you're talking about like the big movie studios, TV networks, all this. One thing that made them big was they controlled distribution. So
Yeah.
if you wanted to watch a movie, you had to watch their movie. And now it's like their nightmare. You can get a consumer can get on the internet and watch some crappy video some tween made on YouTube, and then they could go and watch the big budget Hollywood movie. Then they can go back to YouTube and watch another crappy video, and that's a complete nightmare. I think for these distributors, they're losing complete control of distribution, and they're acknowledging it. With these shortened windows.
And another thing to point out on that same topic is, there was about 2 years of film just sitting there, and the way that film works is that, you don't get your money back until you're in the theater. So the longer any movie waits to sit in the can and not be out in the release, the more money it loses, the less money it makes. So right now, ever since I would say this summer, and very much picking up speed in the autumn, once many people have been vaccinated, is they have been releasing big movies every single week. And if you don't catch anything that isn't like the biggest blockbuster ever, after 2 weeks, it's gone to be replaced by another big blockbuster. I mean, are you getting whiplash from how many movies have been coming out since September?
It's no, it's cool, great. You know what? I feel like they've really held back. I mean, I feel like there's
Oh
not that
no,
much.
not anymore. See, if you go to the movie theater, you'll realize like everything that's coming out now, it's big, it's awesome, and then it's gone, and on to the next big and awesome thing. Uh, Obviously, that'll play out. I will say, in general, the trend this year was sequels and superhero movies. That doesn't seem to be going away. There's just more and more sequels and more superhero movies, less comedies, which I will have to do a whole show on that one day. And no, I would say I'm happy to be back in the movie theater. Hopefully, do you think you'll go and catch a movie in the theater sometime in 2022?
Well, I will probably go see if they release like Dune 1 and 2 on IMAX at the same time, like a double feature. I'll probably go see.
Okay, so you're probably gonna just continue to be a home viewer.
Chris, I love sitting at home on my 5.1 surround sound system. Actually, it's a 6.1 system, and yeah, it's great, man. I got Ethernet straight into my Shield TV. I mean, it's amazing, Chris. Yeah.
Wow. Well, see that goes on to the second topic, which is TV this year. I mean, just on a physical sense, right? Like, have you been to like a Best Buy this year?
No, I haven't.
Well, if you had, and I think you probably go online, you're a gearhead.
Yes.
The quality of TV you can now get, home entertainment system, you can now get with surround sound, with a
Yes.
65-inch 4K. I mean, you can now really have for less than $1,000, or for that matter, even for less than $500, you can now have a really good TV entertainment system. It is so much cheaper now than ever to get a good home entertainment system. I mean, you can get an amazing TV for under $1,000, and you can get a pretty good TV for under 500. And the surround sound systems are cheaper. Pretty much everything. What do you think about just how much cheaper it's gotten and to build your own home theater?
Well, yeah, it's home theater is great. I mean, it's better. I think it's better than even the movies ever were. In the quality of picture. I mean, Blu-ray, 4K. I mean, it looks incredible. Even streaming looks pretty good. I mean, if you can, try to go wired. With Ethernet, of course. Get a Shield TV box if you can. Anything that allows Ethernet is good. I mean, I don't like the sound bars. I like at least 5.1 systems, but I
Oh,
mean,
I've been to your house. You've got a killer system.
oh,
But, I mean, if you're not a gearhead like Randall, then a sound bar certainly will serve you well.
well, sound bar is like bare minimum. Yeah, you want to get a sound. They have sound bars with subwoofers now, and that's the way to go if you're gonna go bare
Right. So
minimum. Yeah.
you've got some great stuff. It's funny. I have my TV is now like around $300. It's a LG. I got it for 350 about 4 years ago, and it was one of the earliest 4Ks. And I pay extra to get like 4K on Netflix, and I have Disney Plus, and I was watching. And it's good. We should do a whole show on it. I'm sorry, this is like a spoiler. Called Secrets of Wales, not the town, but not the part of England, but Wales. And James Cameron produced this documentary about whales this year. It's narrated by Sigourney Weaver. Whales all over the world. And by the way, folks, watch it. It's on Disney Plus. I'll get to Disney Plus later. They've really been a great help this year, but it's in 4K. So I was watching it, Randall, with my girlfriend, and my TV has never looked better. You know
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
mean, there's
saying? Like
not
the
there's not a lot
underwater
of 4K
photography.
content actually out there, and like even to get it streaming is tough sometimes. So you have to pay extra for it. Yeah, it looks. I mean, it looks incredible.
I don't even have to pay extra for it with Disney Plus, only with Netflix. Disney Plus is very nice. Disney Plus will be introducing, and I've heard this more about 2022. They're saying something like IMAX for television.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so that's going to be another new format. So just like watching whale documentaries on a 42-inch screen in super high res. It's I mean, just the technology behind TV viewing, whether it's on your phone now or any of your other devices, just the I mean, I have the new iPhone, and even when I watch stuff on my new iPhone, or I spent a lot of money this year, thank you, EDD, or when I watch stuff on my new laptop, I mean, these screen resolutions are so good.
Well, it's better than film, you know. I mean, like all these people, like all the Christopher Nolans of the world, they have this thing about film. I think it's just because they make a lot of money off of it. Steven Spielberg too, he's one of these guys. But I mean, even with film, you shoot stuff, and then you have to make copies of it, and you gotta, make copies of copies and edit it and make copies of that. I mean, you're losing quality. I mean, with digital, it's like you're losing very little quality from generation to generation. I mean, and you're shooting at 4K. I mean, the old film, the resolution of 35 millimeter, I think still surpasses 4K, but with the generation loss, I mean, you're getting like such incredible quality out of 4K. I mean, it's just
So are the cameras just getting cheaper then, Randall, for film and TV production?
oh yeah, of course. As time goes on, the cameras get cheaper. You know, they're shooting now. I don't even know if anybody's doing this, but you can get way above 4K now when you shoot. But most, here's a dirty little secret. I mean, sometimes I look at the technical specs. Some of these movies, they don't even shoot it in 4K, even though they're going to release it in 4K because because the post production becomes so difficult with 4K. So time consuming that they just shoot it in like 2K, shall we say,
Yeah.
and then they just master it up to 4K, and release it in 4K. I mean, but yeah, I mean, they're not even the potential of the digital shooting pipeline. They're not even. It's barely being tapped out. I mean, I'll give you an example. So the Star Wars prequels, George Lucas was on the cutting edge when he shot those. It was one of the first productions to use digital cameras. Those cameras he used were only 1080p cameras.
Wow.
Yeah. So the potential's like we're not even close. I mean,
So even like my iPhone, is a good film camera. The new 13, the Pros, they even those things can be used to film.
well, yeah. I mean I
Well,
mean, you could
as
see
you're
the
watching
quality.
me right now. You're watching me on my iPhone 13.
You can see the quality that just the home consumer can get out of their iPhone. I mean, you can imagine.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. What am I talking about? The camera you're looking at right now is a brand new iPhone 13 on
Yeah,
my
this
end.
quality is amazing. I mean, you could just imagine the quality if somebody, like, technically speaking, knew what they were doing with like a 4K camera. Even they have 6K cameras, they have 8K cameras. I mean, you could shoot in 8K. I think there's even a 16K camera now, but you can shoot up into 8K and then remaster it down for 4K. I mean, it'd be incredible.
So we'll talk about television as in content now, not technology. And I will say right off the bat, and maybe there is a correlation between technology and content because we'll talk about some TV shows. We're not going to be talking about any 3-camera TV shows. We're not going to be talking about any 24-episode series. We're going to talk about one, two, three, four TV experiences that I really think defined this year much in the same way that, last year's TV experiences like The Last Dance and Tiger King were some of the big TV experiences. I think there's more. I'm just blanking. But this year, I really want to talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. Randall, let's talk about the one that we'll start. Go chronologically. So this year, one of the earliest really good TV shows to get people talking was on Disney Plus, and that was WandaVision. Did you see a WandaVision, Randall?
Yeah, I watched WandaVision. Yeah.
And it's interesting too because technically speaking, WandaVision is almost a parody of old school TV. Spoiler alert! Minor spoiler alert. Almost every episode, or at least I think there were 6 episodes. So 4 of the 6 episodes, or there's 8 episodes, so 6 of the. Anyway, the majority of each of the episodes were shot in a style of old-fashioned TV for each decade. So they did a 50s style, a 60s style, a 70s style, an 80s style, a 90s style, and an early 2000s style.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. I wonder what like a young kid, because like people like us, we grew up watching all these shows in syndication, so we've seen a lot of these shows from these different eras, and like I think the kids today, I don't even know if they've seen I Love Lucy
Well,
anymore.
they certainly watched Modern Family and The Office. So when you
Yeah, well
get
those
to
those are like one camera sitcoms which didn't even exist like a long time ago. I mean, it's
right,
like
so they get that in those episodes, or they get the Malcolm in the Middle one. So I mean, I think it's broad enough, and also I don't want to just say that WandaVision's genius is its deconstruction of the last 65 years of TV watching. However, I would say WandaVision's genius is certainly its deconstruction of the last 65, 70 years of TV watching, wouldn't you say?
I think it's
One
just
of.
really entertaining. I think it's just really entertaining. It's fun to see them mimic those old shows, both in costumes and acting, but also in the script, but also in the technical aspects of it. Sure.
Absolutely. Acting, script, costumes, all of that. And it had really strong acting. It had Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, and the can't do wrong, Kathryn Hahn, who I'm going to say right off
They're
the bat,
making a
Kathryn
show
Hahn,
for her. They're making a show
Ka-
around her because she was so good in this.
I saw Kathryn Hahn in so many things this year. And let me just say, in my opinion, best actress of the year is Kathryn Hahn for everything she has been in. No surprise she was a graduate of I think the Yale School of Drama. She is just on fire. So I want to say this much about WandaVision, which is WandaVision is to Marvel superhero movies what I think The Mandalorian was to Star Wars, which is WandaVision is proof of concept that you can take a Marvel movie studio budget, which for a movie, you can instead put it on Disney Plus, run it over 6 episodes, 8 episodes. I think it was 8, but you can run it between 6 to 8 episodes, each one about 30 to 40 minutes. So you're looking at, I guess, what, 4 hours about of storytelling with roughly the same budget as a film. And you can get much more character exploration. You know what I'm saying? I feel like as we keep on watching more Marvel movies, and I would have said the same thing last year about Star Wars movies, to me, the movies are getting a little bit too monotonous and abstract. There is not enough character exploration. It seems like every third act of a Marvel movie involves a fight in the sky with CGI characters.
Well,
But it,
there's something I've been thinking for a while is that if you compare it to another medium, movies are kind of like short stories, and TV shows are kind of like novels.
yeah. And
And
yeah, go on. Yeah, you were right.
when movies try to get too novelistic and try to shove too much stuff in there, they get pretty long-winded and boring. I mean, it's better for a movie to have like a very short and snappy, like couple of twists in there, and be very conceptual. I mean, I feel like the movies work best that way.
Yeah, no, we'll do a whole episode on what Disney Plus is doing with Star Wars and Marvel. But just for now, I wanted to say that WandaVision's great contribution was it got people who were not into superheroes, and God knows Scarlet Witch and the Vision aren't like the most popular heroes to begin with. It got people who are not into the TV, into the movies, and into the concepts watching and enjoying. And it did show what I would argue for the last ever since the Superman movie TV show of the 1950s, television has been trying to figure out how to get adults interested in superhero stories. And with the exception maybe of the Hulk and Wonder Woman in the 70s, I just don't think they've had much success until WandaVision. So that was what was cool about WandaVision. So let's move over to Mare of Easttown, which came out also in the winter spring. Did you end up seeing Mare of Easttown? I
No, I've
forgot.
never seen it.
Please watch it so we can one day do a whole thing on it, or I would have. So Mare of Easttown is, a crime thriller, but what made it really interesting was it takes place in in a Philadelphia working class suburb, a rural area. It stars Kate Winslet. And I'm from the East Coast, and you've spent time in rural Pennsylvania, right? You go up to Shamokin sometimes.
I've been there, yes.
So you know what that area looks like.
I know it well. Yes.
And you know what the people and the life is like.
Yes.
And it was written by somebody who grew up in that area. It was filmed in that area. Kate Winslet eschewed good hair, good makeup. You can see her roots. You can see her bad skin. The clothing is bad. They use real homes, real furniture. Everything has a very real, naturalistic aspect that you don't normally see in high, glossy, expensive TV shows, even though HBO, which produced it, clearly spent a ton of money. And strangely enough, Evan Peters, who gives a great performance in WandaVision, is also gives a great performance in Mare of Easttown. So there's your connection between the two. He is maybe also one of my favorite actors of 2021. He too has just been killing it. But what was really nice about Mare of Easttown, beyond the great acting, the strong writing, and the sense of mise en scène, which you really don't see because class is not. We'll get into this now. I would argue up until really this year, television has gone out of its way in the last couple of decades to avoid showing people who are poor.
Well, I think television has always avoided showing people that are poor.
I think that the Connors, before that, the Roseanne was always an exception. And I will say that the Connors minus Roseanne is a much better show now because it definitely deals with it, but it deals still within a traditional TV format where Mare of Easttown tells a self-contained story about what the last 40 years of the deconstruction of the Rust Belt has done to people, so that everything that happens, be it the crime, the life situations, really do involve a certain social awareness. And it worked. It's solid, but it does leave some very sad questions about the difficulties of growing up and raising children in what elites would call Trump's America. But
Have you seen
America?
Have you seen Dopesick?
No.
Now, Dopesick, I think, when you talk about Mare of Easttown, I think of Dopesick, which I watched as a great show. I mean, it's based on a nonfiction book about the opioid epidemic, and it's great because it goes into characters that are, and it's a fictionalized show. It goes into characters that are poor, I guess you could say, but then it goes all the way up, and it depicts I forget their name now. The family that unleashed the opioid epidemic on America.
Oh, the Sackler family.
The Sacklers, yeah. So you get to see inside of their home and what they're like, and it's a well done show. I mean,
and that features Michael Keaton, right? And
Michael Keaton, as usual, is great in it. Yeah.
Same thing with Mare of Easttown. Gene Smart, the guy from The Office who I forgot his name, but he was in it every so often is in it, and Kate Winslet. So yeah, you're getting movie actors now and very strong TV character actors like Paul Bettany, like Kathryn Hahn. You're getting people who would normally see in movies for the most part, or in small forgettable moments in TV shows, getting front and center in these very well produced shows. Now, one of the shows that was so popular this year, we did an entire episode, and Randall, you really took to it, and boy, was that a water cooler one, was the Squid Game.
Yeah, in the other episode when I talked about how it's it's essentially a Marxist show, where in the sense that it has a Marxist interpretation of our life, of the modern capitalist lifestyle. So Squid Game is it is. I mean, a lot of times people talk about shows that came out of nowhere, and Squid Game literally is a show that came out of nowhere. I mean, I think Netflix financed it, but the director-writer was like a first-timer, and, Netflix has been financing projects all over the world, and, just seeing what they can get. And Squid Game comes out of South Korea, and it just became it became the number one show on Netflix, all over the world, and people were shocked. I mean, I even read a story where I think it was in China, somebody pirated it in China, and they went to prison for watching. I think it was China. It could have been North Korea. But yeah, I mean, Squid Game is just it's and I think one of the reasons it became so popular is because it is like an essentially Marxist interpretation of our life, and you rarely see anything like this. It's a real questioning of capitalism. and the capitalist system. And yeah, and like, and we were, and, now that it's Christmas time, we talked about this last Christmas time. You should listen to our Christmas Carol specials. But this is essentially the Christmas Carol too. The Christmas Carol is a Marxist interpretation of the capitalist system before Marxism. It's fascinating. I mean, and I think when people watch Squid Game, that's what they're keen into. They're seeing just how close they feel it. They feel they feel they feel that affinity with the characters and what the characters are going through. Their financial struggles and how their financial struggles are influencing their lives. I mean, all of us, Chris, except for the 1%, can relate to Squid Game. And that's why shows like Squid Game never get made, because the people that are okaying the money for these shows, they're the 1%. I don't think anybody in the 1% can understand Squid Game. I'll just say
I
right
definitely
now.
think that it's interesting how both Squid Game and Mare of Easttown kind of go about the same problem in completely different ways. Whereas Mare of Easttown is grounded in naturalism and deals with money and family and issues of that sort. Squid Game, I think, is, as you say, much more of a metaphysical exploration on a heightened reality in this, and goes after those same issues. And they both do it very well. It's amazing how Mare of Easttown is so distinctively American that it's more America than you normally see on television. TV doesn't really like to deal with real America. And Squid Game is so foreign, but so relatable because South Korea's hypercapitalism is just a darker inversion of America's hypercapitalism. So to end it off on what I consider to be the big water cooler conversation right now on TV, and I don't think you've watched it, and I'm not sponsored by Disney Plus, but I have been watching and talking with everybody I know about Get Back, the Peter Jackson, Michael Lindsay Hogg, 8-episode Beatles compilation. Have you been watching it?
No, I haven't seen it. It's on Apple.
No, it's on Disney Plus.
It is? Okay,
Yes.
I'll have to watch it.
And what you know, when the Michael Lindsay Hogg was filming the documentary on the Beatles, uh, they had about a month to work on a new album that they were going to perform live for the first time in 2 years. So uh, Michael Lindsay Hogg, who is the illegitimate son of Orson Welles, uh, he put audio and cameras and recording devices everywhere while they're working. And if you ever watch the movie Get Back, which good luck, it's out of print, it's just basically a concert movie about how the Beatles were about to break up. It's not a bad movie. It's okay as documentary goes. It's just not great. The music is the salvation of that documentary. But Peter Jackson, who is a very big Beatles fan, and he went through all of these hours of audio footage and video. He cleaned up everything as he did with those World War One.
Yeah, he made a movie called I think it's They Shall Not Grow Old, which is
Yes.
extraordinarily good movie. I mean, it is I think that's the reason like 1917 and every other World War One movie
Yeah.
that came out after that got made, okay?
Right.
Nolan made one. But yeah, They Shall
The
Not Grow Old. It's just he took a bunch of old footage and
the
cleaned it up.
digital restoration quality on this is frighteningly good.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
amazing.
to the point where you look at the documentary and Paul McCartney looks like he's a contemporary 25-year-old. And the way these kids dressed back then, the Beatles is kind of the way young rockers dress today. So it's a little just jarring to see. And uh, I will say this much, I don't want to give too much away, but for the most part, you were just a fly on the wall as you watch these four people and other people create uh, songs, not just for this album, but songs that will be made on Abbey Road or songs that will be made solo. How you see them play off of each other and you learn things about the characters that you didn't know before. You watch the creative process, you watch the group process. Do I think you need to be a Beatles fan to enjoy it? I can't say because I am a Beatles fan and I've kind of been hesitant about showing it to my girlfriend because she doesn't know as much about it. But part of me says it's just a solid documentary because just watching the group dynamics is very compelling. Uh, and all my friends who are Beatles fans are like, oh, did you know that about Paul? Did you know that about John? Isn't it wild how they came up with that song? Uh, So yeah, it's really quite good. So let's get on to live entertainment, right, Randall? That was one of the great returns. Is that this year? I mean, you could go outdoors, you could go indoors, and I'm not lying. I took advantage of that in the summer. My girlfriend, she's a stand-up comic, so I went to a lot of shows that she did both outside and indoors, both in LA and Atlanta. Uh, I would say, did you go to any live shows this year?
The only thing I did was I went to karaoke. So they had a special cover for the mic. We had to put a cover on the mic, and we
Yeah,
had to use
same
our
thing with
own
the
cover.
comedy shows. Yeah.
And then we had to wear a mask. So we had to sing karaoke through the
Oh
our
my God,
mask and
really?
the microphone cover. Yes. And then we had to, only use our own microphone cover, of course. And then the karaoke guy, he wiped the mic down with like some sort of antiseptic cloth between performances. And
Could you sing with the mask on?
well, we had to. I
Yeah,
mean,
but did it come out muffled, or it was like,
well, some people didn't have the lungs, so they cheated and took the mask off. But it was weird. I mean, I was fine. I mean, most people was fine. I mean, I think there was some research done like a couple of years ago. Even they showed that singing karaoke was like a major transmitter of COVID. So I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, because
I
you're
mean,
singing out into a crowd and you're spitting. I mean, it's not a good situation.
I'll say this for the comedy club experience. No, all the comics had their masks off. Uh,
We also had to
now,
show Vax before we went to the
oh,
bar. By the way, we had to show our
same with
Vax
every live
status.
entertainment thing, and I was vaxxed. But I'll say for the comedy clubs, it was interesting because, like, you know, as long as you're drinking, you can have your mask off. And Kelly made a good point, my girlfriend who's a performer, that it's true. People are less likely to laugh when they have a mask on. You're just not, you know what I'm saying? It's just physically uncomfortable to laugh. You're just less inclined to do so. So I will go out on a limb and say the places where the audience was masked and not drinking much or not drinking at all, those audiences were very subdued. And the audiences where, especially in Georgia, where I don't even think anyone cared about a mask for the most part, they just wanted their drink on. They were more like a traditional. I was a member of those, a traditional comedy audience. So uh, it was interesting to watch people too. I saw people like Bill Burr, who is a pretty big comic, but he hadn't performed in like a year and a half live. And you do notice when you watch these comics, whether it's on specials, they're everyone's a little out of practice. You know what I'm saying? It's a tool as a
Well, a lot of
performer.
comics, they hone their routine by popping in at nightclubs like every night for weeks and weeks, for
Yeah,
months, and they try out jokes. And I saw Chris Rock do it one night at on the Comedy Store in Melrose, was it? No, not the
yeah.
Comedy Stores. What is that
Laugh
place?
Factory.
I think it's the
Oh,
Improv.
the
But
the improv is on. Yeah,
but yeah, he had a notebook, and if people laughed, he wrote down that they laughed, and if people didn't laugh, he would cross it out. I mean, he was.
yeah. I saw Dana Gould about a month ago at Flappers, and he was doing the same thing. Where you could just these are really funny people, but you could see, and it's kind of cool. You'll never see it again. Even people who are at the top of their game are not at the top of their game. Just we're not at the top of their game at this year. I'm sure by now they've all gotten it together, but
Well, not
it
all
was
comics are like that. I recall that Albert Brooks, he said he used to come up with routines before going on the Tonight Show, and when he went on Tonight Show, uh, he had never performed them before. That was like,
yeah. But what I'm saying is, and it is that
but yeah,
this
most
was.
comics they do that.
I forgot. I even went to comedy clubs in New York. I saw Jeanine Garofalo among other people, and New York, Atlanta, LA. These are good big cities, and these are good big comics. And as good as they are, as professional as they are, as long as and they've been around for a long time, a lot of the people I've seen, uh, part of it was that their material was oriented around COVID, and I don't really think COVID is a great comedy bit right now. I mean, sometimes you'll really hit it if you know how to hit it. And Trump's gone, so that's also a problem because that had been a source of so much comedy. But what I will say, we'll get to this in a minute on comedy, but it was interesting to watch how many. Now, I went and saw Hall and Oates at the Hollywood Bowl in October. It was like their last performance after being on tour since like April. And oh no, the singers, they got their game down. You know what I'm saying?
Were people wearing masks in the audience?
Yes, they were. It was Squeeze open for them. And I've seen Squeeze a lot. I honestly felt like Squeeze was not as tight as they've been before, but they certainly were pretty solid. Not Ramir. Not I've seen them many times. This was the least exciting I've seen them be, but they were on and they were certainly doing good work. But Hall and Oates, they come out. Those guys are in their 70s, and like COVID, what COVID? You know, they're just they. I guess if you've been doing the same thing since 1982, you pretty much have your game down. You know, you can take a year and a half off when you've been busy for 40 years.
Did you have to show your vax status before you went in, or
all of these things? You had to show your vax status. All of these things, you had to wear a mask. All of these things, you didn't have to wear a mask when you were drinking. Now, the Hollywood Bowl is a lot nicer because it's outdoors, so you know that helps.
Yeah, the CDC came out like I don't know, like a year ago, and they said that outdoor transmission's almost non-existent. It was something like 1% of cases. So yeah, outdoors is very safe.
Yeah. Now, speaking of indoors, I went back to being a bartender at the Alex Theater in Glendale. So I've been working indoor shows for the last month or so. We've been doing a lot of Nutcrackers, as 'tis the season. So I'm back working in a 1,400 seat theater. And we have been really good. They have an entire group of security and ushers who will not let you in without your vax card. They're very hardcore.
Have you ever seen somebody turned away?
Yeah, they've definitely been turning.
What was that like? Were they mad?
Yeah. But you know, the city is really fining people a lot of money. It's between $1,000 to $5,000, depending on how many offenses. If you've got 1,400 people at $1,000 to $5,000 a person, it can get very expensive very quick. So there's a real incentive. Now, I work in food and beverage, so I'm around people when they have I'm not around people when they have their masks off when they come to me. We have put a seating area for people to, during intermission, go off and eat and drink, which is as far from me as humanly possible.
So you're wearing a mask when you're
I'm wearing
people?
a mask. If I work with other people, they're wearing a mask. If I'm working with other people, I'm more than 6 feet away from those people. And even when I'm serving customers, because of the way we do serving now, you know, we have a fridge for them to take out cold drinks. We put anything on a counter at a distance from them. I'll often wear gloves when handling things, which is good anyway. And I used to, but I'm much more aware of it. They're much more aware of it. That said, you know, I would say that now I think we've all come to this place where we view either indoor or outdoor entertainment, as long as everyone has got proof of vaccination, as long as everybody wears their masks on most of the time, we've come to some sort of agreement that this is like flying, that this is a moderate risk experience. And let me tell you, we're selling out, you know, like we're filling up, you know, people are going to the theater again. They're going to see live performance. They're bringing their kids, they're applauding, they're laughing. And it's interesting because a year ago we were all talking about, you know, would we ever go back to work again in the theater? Would we ever have live performance? We've even talked about this. And yeah, it turned out all we really needed to do, we didn't have to reduce the amount of seats. We didn't have to reduce the amount of people. They didn't have to raise the prices. All we had to do is just get vaccinated and wear masks.
Well, the vaccine, I mean, is the key. I mean, that really helps. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the hesitancy is out there. I mean, just just take the vaccine and go about your business, you know?
And again, just kind of like movies had a backlog, live entertainment's had a backlog. So right now, like almost any music band or performer you've ever liked has put out an album and has gone on tour. I'm going to jump to that right now. We'll get to comedy in a moment in art shows, but uh, a lot of oldies put out new music, and I'm just going to be very brief. Almost none of it was memorable.
Oh, I don't even know if I've heard it.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'm acknowledging that if you had a career in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, yeah, there's a good chance some band you like from that era has put out a new album. Highly unlikely that you're going to go, man, I'm loving, like Tears for Fears put out a new album. Okay. Uh, you know, sure. Paul McCartney put out a new album. Okay. Like a lot of people I love put out new album. Now, Colin Hay put out an album of covers, which he recorded during the pandemic, and it's awesome. I would strongly recommend Colin Hay's collection of covers. I think it's called "I Just Don't Want to Do Myself" or Colin Hay Under the Covers. It's good. It's really good, and he's on tour. So go support Colin Hay from Men at Work because he figured it out. Elton John, I thought, did the coolest thing on earth, which is he was trapped in the house. He couldn't go anywhere, but he wanted to put out a new song. So he took 4 of his old songs and he kind of created this mashup, and he got Dua Lipa to sing some of the parts. And it really works. Have you heard the Elton John Dua Lipa?
No, I haven't heard it.
So they took Rocket Man, they took an obscure song I can't remember. They took anyway, they took 4 Elton John songs from the 70s and early 80s that are pretty well big hits. And I should have done a little more research. And they made it into a mix, and they got Dua Lipa to record some parts. They added a dance track, and Elton John now has a song on England's top 10 list, making him the only artist in history to have had a song on the top 10 list in 6 decades in a row.
It reminds me of the Frank Sinatra Duets concept album that came out like towards the end of his life. I mean, that was a great idea too. It worked. People loved it.
The mashup on this one works too. I mean, there's a good video by a guy named David Bennett who I recommend, who breaks down how the songs are in similar keys so that the mashup is melodic and works. And there's some very smart choices made in the way these songs kind of land the way they land. If I can find a link, we'll put it at the bottom of the link. But he was able to, so he and Colin Hay, I think both did some really creative stuff last year, and it paid off for both of them this year in good music. And maybe the fact that these other artists aren't as exciting to me, I can't say. I certainly, if you love their new albums, then good. So let's talk about comedy this year, right? We talked a little bit about it, but comedy was also very controversial this year because, when Trump was in office, just the very act of criticizing Trump, I would argue, made you liberal. Wouldn't you say, Randall?
Maybe, I guess. I mean,
but we just assumed, right? Like if you were making fun of Trump and Trump supporters, then
Trump is this interesting persona. He's an interesting person because he demands personally and publicly complete loyalty. And if you criticize him, you're on the outs with him. And so, I mean, some of this comes from Trump. I mean, I think other politicians in the past, you could criticize and remain in that party, remain an ally. But Donald Trump, him and the whole atmosphere around him, it demands complete loyalty. It's a fascistic movement.
Now that Trump is out of the equation, people who we would have thought, oh, that person's clearly liberal. So like someone like Bill Maher, who spent a good 4 to 5 years going after Trump. Now it's Biden is president. You realize, no, Bill Maher is pretty crazy ass conservative in a really dark way. He is. I'm not saying he's like George Will is conservative, David Brooks is conservative, but no, Bill Maher is straight up reactionary. I mean,
I think Bill Maher is more of a moderate. I think he's more of a moderate, always has been.
Not at all. The shit, I'm sorry, I'm going to curse. The shit he's been spewing out this year.
Okay, for example.
Well, he has really been riding this whole thing about society, on gender bathrooms, He's like, everyone gets a prize for showing up, and people are their gender, and he's like really hitting all like, the left doesn't understand. They need to wake up. That's why they're losing the election, because they're too busy about defunding the police. There's no such thing as police brutality. I mean, he is really.
Well, I don't think he would say there's no such thing as police brutality. I think he's
been appearing on Fox. Fox has been playing his clips. I mean,
there's a lot of liberals that have traditionally appeared on Fox because they're trying to talk to that audience.
Fox has been they've been showing his clips to try to own the libs. Like, look, here's your liberal Bill Maher. He's talking about why Medicare for all is bad. Here's your liberal Bill Maher. He's talking about why policing is
well.
good.
I do think I saw him interview like a billionaire. I forget the guy's name, and Bill Maher is economically very conservative. I mean,
he's also socially very conservative. For somebody who enjoys prostitutes and drugs, he is highly intolerant of other people's sexuality, identity. He is. He's pretty much.
Well, he was making a point when it comes to. I mean, you have to take him on issue.
Maher. You don't want to defend him. Trust me. I've been watching him.
Well, you have to take. I watch him too. You have to take him on an issue by issue basis, And I think that when it comes to like for instance, you talk about defund the police. I mean, that is a niche issue. That's an unpopular issue.
But he goes with it with a heavy hand, and he goes with it without thought, and he says shit to be provocative. And honestly, and I didn't really think we'd do a whole episode on crazy shit Bill Maher has said this year, but he has said a lot of hate.
Maybe we should do a show on Bill Maher. He's been interesting. I mean,
I would say he's been an a-hole of the worst kind. And no, honestly,
what are some more?
Don't ask, because then I would have had to have come up and done all research. So if you want to do a whole show on it, we will.
Maybe we should. I mean,
but right now,
he does seem to be a lightning rod.
I'm going to point out that he has decided to make himself a critic of anything progressive. He really has. And I can't stop the show right now to look up stuff. I can, but it would make the show 2 hours. And he's not even the worst offender. The worst offender this year was Dave Chapelle, who has gone from being a guy who really talks about racism, prejudice, to being just a straight up transphobic.
Well, I think something interesting
and please don't defend him.
Well, I think something interesting that Chapelle does is he seems to say he seems to compare the trans civil rights movement with the black civil rights movement. And he does that a lot in his act. And he talks about how people are more on board with trans civil rights than they are with black civil rights, which is...
No, look, let's cut the bullshit. He's the guy who says there's no such thing as gender identification. He says, I am a TERF, a trans realist. I mean, no equivocation. No need for equivocation. He has even said, I'll apologize when you admit Hannah Gadsby's not funny. I mean, he has really doubled down and tripled down on straight up hate. Please don't equivocate him. I mean, in fairness, Bill Maher and Dave Chapelle are just, I'm saying, they're just hate mongers with a really big platform. You can say what you want about Joe Rogan. I think Joe Rogan gives a lot of poor information on some important stuff. But I will say about Joe Rogan is that I honestly think Joe Rogan has no hate in his heart. You know what I'm saying? I think that Joe Rogan is a very curious stoner who wants to question a lot of preordained views because he likes being iconoclast. And maybe he's really off in a lot of things, but I honestly feel that he is challenging people's notions of what is right or wrong because he doesn't want people to just believe in rote things. But Bill Maher and Dave Chapelle are part of a group of middle-aged men and older who just haven't caught up with the time. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I don't know. I think you're going a little bit too far on those two.
So you think, do you share the same views as Dave Chapelle on transgender people?
Well, I think that
are you a TERF?
All right, you want to hear my real opinion? Okay, so I think that the whole idea of a TERF, it comes out of radical feminism, and it's an open question in radical feminism that should we accept trans women into radical feminist spaces, and that's an open question. Within that movement, they've been discussing it for decades.
Right, but do you believe that?
What do I think the answer is? I don't know the answer, Chris. This is an ongoing discussion, ongoing intellectual discussion that's been going on for decades. It's not apologism. It's a tough question.
Do you want to have legal rights or not? It's very clear forward. Should transgendered people be able to use the restroom of the gender they identify?
Well, Chris, should you be able to go into a women's restroom anytime you feel like it? Or how about if you go to a gym and can you go into the women's locker room whenever you feel like it and take a shower?
Should that be allowed? Male. Right, because I'm a cisgendered male. I am both biologically and sociologically identify as male.
Okay, but but you wouldn't go in there because women wouldn't want you in there, right?
I don't go because it's not my gender. It's not my sex. I go to the bathroom that is assigned for people who identify as male because I identify as male. Or I go to bathrooms that have no gender, which has become more the preference.
So you're saying people should just be able to go into whatever space they want just because they feel like it?
No, I believe that a person's gender defines what bathroom they go to unless it's obviously a gender-neutral bathroom.
Okay, well, that's the problem, people's gender is in dispute.
But that's intolerance. That is truly intolerant.
It's an open question.
It's not an open question because the real laws are decided every day based on whether or not you consider transgendered people to be a protected group or not. If they are, then they deserve all the legal rights and representations against discrimination. They should have the right to play sports in the gender they are part of. They have the right then to use the bathroom. Or if you don't believe that, then you deny them those rights.
Well, what if a bunch of radical feminists want to create a space that excludes trans women? I mean, should that be allowed? I mean, should that be allowed?
No, that's not the way the law works in America.
What if they want to exclude men? Should that be allowed?
Again, I don't know what you're doing, man. This is really.
I'm just saying these are hard questions. I don't think
these are not hard questions. These are legal questions, and they come down to whether or not you believe transgendered women are women. Period. Or transgendered men are men. Period. Are they men or are they women? As a society, on the whole, we've come to the decision that gender is not something that you are stuck with by your birth. Gender is fluid. Sexual identity is fluid. It is a construct, and now people can choose whether to identify with a singular gender, multiple genders, or no gender. We've come to that decision. That's the society we're living in.
So you don't think
one of the great problems with middle-aged stand-up comics is they don't really, and this has been historically all my life, middle-aged comics, because I remember as a kid watching people like Buddy Hackett and Pat Moreno talk about the goddamn hippies with their long hair and their love of pot and free love and how they don't want to work. And every middle-aged group somehow thinks that shitting on the youth of today is the way to go. The difference is that we're now in a time in society where we're just more culturally aware of sexism, racism, classism, whereas before any joke kind of worked.
Well, I mean, there was a blip for a few years there of so-called woke comedy where there was this idea that comics it was holier than thou comedy, and comics were going to come in and tell jokes that were going to change the world and make everybody more progressive. And yeah, so with Dave Chappelle's special and Joe Rogan and Bill Maher, it seems like I don't know. I want to say it's like a backlash against woke comedy, but woke comedy never really caught on, I don't think. I mean,
I don't even know what you mean by woke comedy. I honestly don't. Younger comics understand the world better than older comics because they are more willing to adapt to the world that they live in. So I guess by default, any comic who is not a racist or a sexist, and doesn't, by the way, have to be under 50, because certainly Mark Maron and Sarah Silverman are over 50, but any comic who's just not a racist, a sexist, a classist, any comic who doesn't really need to punch down, I guess by default is a woke comic.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah,
well, then I would argue that's the majority That's the majority of comics. Thank
Right.
God.
That is the
That
majority of
is the
comics
majority
today
of
for the
You
last
don't
like
need. I mean, and I will say that what you're seeing are just a bunch of old men who are so culturally out of it, who so appeal to a niche group of other dispossessed people. They're kind of like Hitler in the beer hall, you know. These are their brown shirt followers, and they will go down with them. Look, Cosby is out of jail. Louis C.K. is back on the road, and there are people who are more than happy to watch rapists and and support them. So, as bad as Dave Chappelle and Bill Maher are, their great transgressions are verbal transgressions versus the physical transgressions of Louis C.K. and the heinously physical transgressions of Bill Cosby. So, and we'd had this discussion before. It's just become much clearer. Assholes really like comedy. But you said something to that effect yesterday.
say it again.
You said it to me yesterday at the pre-show, and it was a really good point. Assholes really like comedy.
I think I said to you that there's a lot of assholes that want to be comics. I think that's what I said to you, Chris. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, either one. I think it works if there's.
No, I think it's true. There's a certain type of person.
A lot of comics were assholes.
Well, I think what I said to you, Chris, is there's a certain type of personality where you're a complete asshole, and you think, well, where can I be free to be a complete asshole? You know, and have people actually like it and put up with it and, you know, appreciate me for being a total asshole. And it's if you become a comic, you know. And I don't think that applies to these men you're talking about, but yeah, I mean, we've all seen it. I mean,
I think it applies to these men.
Okay, well, okay. But yeah, so there's a certain type of personality. Maybe Bill Maher a little bit. I don't know. But there's a certain kind of guy.
I think it applies to Dave Chappelle. I don't think it applies to Louis C.K. or Bill Cosby because I think they're slightly worse than assholes. But yeah.
Yeah, so there's a certain type of personality. You know, they are an asshole and they want a place where they can just be free to just like abuse people out in the open. And stand-up comedy is that forum. You know, it's that place.
Well,
you know, I'll disagree with you.
I would
I don't
argue
think
this
these men
year
are like that,
it's hard to know if stand-up comedy is that forum or not anymore because people are finally holding comics accountable to the shit they're spewing out, which is awesome. I mean, we hold actors, politicians, and business people.
Let me ask you a question, Chris. Who is the best, funniest woke comic, would you say?
I don't know what you mean by woke comic. You know what I'm saying? I think Patton Oswalt is very funny.
Okay, Oswalt. Okay. Oswalt.
I think Mark Maron is very funny. Is he woke? You know,
Maron could be woke. I wouldn't say he's a woke comic. No.
But the thing is, he doesn't punch down.
But okay, so maybe Maron and Oswalt are like good examples. I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody younger. Well, I mean, Hannah Gadsby.
John Mulaney doesn't punch down. I mean, I haven't heard his new material. He might all of a sudden because he went through a weird experience. But
Gadsby's probably the wokest, right? I mean, she's like.
But I don't know if she's wokest or both.
You know, it's interesting because Chapelle called her out. You know, because it's Chapelle calls her out.
Called her. Well, don't say that. That's bullshit. He included her, and then she said, "Why do?" No, here's what happened. The head of Netflix says we have all sorts of people, like even Hannah Gadsby, and Hannah Gadsby said, "Why are you dragging me into this shit?" That was her words, which is a reasonable thing. She didn't ask to be part of it, and then he decides he's going to shit on her because let's be honest, if he doesn't like transgendered people, he sure as fuck doesn't like lesbians. He certainly doesn't like lesbians who don't subscribe to the norms of appearance that he wants. I mean, please, you really don't want to go down this road. Dave Chappelle is a horrible human being, and I've met him, and I know people who like him. And if I ever meet him again, he is a hate monger. He's no different than Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or any other, or a Klansman. He's just people you like to pretend that because he has said things that were true and honest in the past, and that validates or redeems what he says now.
So you met Dave Chappelle. What was that like?
I met him when he was 19. He was a friend of mine's roommate. He was a quiet kid. You know, I was actually surprised he became successful. I don't think he is inherently a bad person. I don't even think Bill Maher is inherently a bad person. I've met him. I just think both of these men have been for so long saying whatever comes to their own mind that they have reached a point where they don't check with what they're saying, and they don't like to be challenged. And the people who support them, I don't really think like to be challenged. I'm not saying you. I'm saying the people who have been supporting them in the public eye don't want to be challenged. And then unless you and I think maybe one of the things we learned about comedy in the last few years is how many people are sexually inappropriate in comedy. But this year we learned just how many people aren't just sexually inappropriate, but just socially inappropriate. And I think it's great, in fairness, that
Well, it's the
at the end of
forum.
the day,
Comedy stand-up is the forum for the socially inappropriate. I mean, that's why the assholes are attracted to it. I mean, that's the whole point, right? I mean,
no, not really. I mean, the great comics of yesterday weren't great because they were assholes. No one goes, man, I love how assholic Steve Martin was. I love what an asshole Robin Williams was. And I never hear people say that. Oh, those Marx Brothers, they're so funny by being assholes.
well, isn't an aspect of comedy to be socially inappropriate?
It's a challenge. It's to punch up, not to punch down. Sure, historically speaking, there's been a lot of comedy about look how funny black people are. Look how funny Jewish people are. Look how funny. I mean, that's horrible humor, and we don't indulge in that anymore. Thank God. We don't. I mean, one of the best things maybe about this year is we finally realized a lot of humor isn't really funny. I didn't even get to like Dr. Seuss. We ran out of time. But I'm glad that Dr. Seuss got outed this year for his racism.
Yeah, Dr. Seuss's racism is really bad, by the way. If you, but
and I felt bad too because I remember it was Dr. Seuss and Tintin that were both outed for their racism, and both there was a book by Tintin by Hergé, and there was a book by Dr. Seuss, and I had bought them for children, and I had bought not only just bought them for children, but I had bought them for biracial children years ago. I mean, Will Wheaton wrote a really nice piece, just came out about the problem with all of this is that when you're young, you get normalized to stuff that you shouldn't be normalized to. So this year, we're at least having that conversation.
All right, I got one more question. I got one more question for you. So, people like Chapelle and Bill Maher,
yeah,
if they're so awful, why the large audience?
Oh, well, if Trump is so awful, why did so many people vote for Trump?
Yeah, why?
If Hitler was so awful, why did so many people vote for Hitler?
Yeah, why?
I don't know. I guess as long as people support you, you're good. So I guess that's the answer. I guess as long as there's a large group of people who support you, whatever you say is right.
Well, I mean, do people who find Chapelle and Maher entertaining, I mean, are they awful people too? I mean, is that the answer? Is that what you think?
Well, one would seem to follow the other, wouldn't it? I mean, in the end of the day, I don't know everybody who likes anybody, but at the end of the day, certainly those people who support hate mongers have to not have a lot of empathy for other people who are not like them. And maybe because 2020, 2021, maybe we've lost our empathy. Maybe one of the things our art is reflecting is that we don't have empathy anymore for people.
Well, it's possible these people are just being socially transgressive and people just like the spectacle of it.
No, it's more than that. No, these people, I think one of the saddest things that has occurred in the last several years is tribalism and the rise of hatred. I mean, look, we're in many ways we're no different than Europe in the 30s. We are dealing with hyperinflation. We're dealing with poverty. We're dealing with factionalism. We're dealing with so many. We're dealing with the worst forms of late stage capitalism. So yeah, different groups of people now are really falling into their own little tribe, and a lot of people are full of hate and anger, and they just want to lash out at whoever they can. And the easiest people to lash out again are always the marginalized people because they have the least amount of protection.
All right.
Well, that was the year.
That was good. That was a good speech at the end there, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening. I'm always curious to hear what our audience members think about Randall's point of view and my point of view. I don't expect everybody to agree with Randall. I don't expect everyone to agree with me. we're looking forward to more wonderful shows next year or this year. Until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Happy New Year.